Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me here on Facebook Live. I'm Dr. Alexis Conason. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm in private practice here in New York City, and I'm also the founder of the Anti-Diet Plan. The Anti-Diet Plan is a 6-week program that is now online, and the next program is going to be starting in January, right in time for all of the New Year's resolutions hubbub. And it's a program that's really designed to help you make peace with food. Instead of fighting against our body like we so often do, it's really about coming to terms with feeling compassionate towards ourselves and accepting towards our body, and learning how to really embrace a joyful and healthy and loving relationship with food and our body. That's also pleasurable, because I think that pleasure is such a undersold part of life, and food is a huge source of it, as it should be. So I want to help people remove all of the shame and guilt around eating and really bring back pleasure in food. So thank you all for joining me today. We're going to be we're going to be talking about how to set boundaries during the holidays. And I think there's just something about the holidays that tends to, bring up all of the old dynamics when we go home, even as adults, and go back to whether we go home or just reunite with family that we don't see all the time. There's something about the holidays that tends to pull for us to fall back into old habits, old patterns, old ways of relating, and often those are ways that don't feel good. So sometimes it's like we step in the door of a family event and we're that little child again, and people relate to us that way. People don't see all the ways that we've changed. And often it unfortunately falls on us on how to set boundaries and how to let people know, whether it's friends or family or strangers or coworkers, just to let them know that where your line is and what's acceptable for you, what you're willing to engage in, and what you're not. So one big thing that tends to come up around the holidays is food policing, is people telling you what you should or shouldn't eat. Lots and lots of talk about diets. I was just at Thanksgiving last week, and I hope everyone had a really wonderful Thanksgiving. And this was very much in the room. I had family commenting on my plate, on what I was eating, that I was eating so much. And it's really, to be honest, even though I teach about this and I talk to my clients about how to set boundaries and how to respond to those kinds of situations, it's really hard. It's often said kind of jokingly, or in a setting that doesn't allow for a full conversation about it. And it can be really hard to figure out how to manage those kinds of situations. And full disclosure, I didn't do much about it. I didn't say much. And I think that that is okay. Part of setting our boundaries is also recognizing that it's not our responsibility to always have to educate people about why this kind of behavior is problematic. Sometimes we just have to protect ourselves, and sometimes the easiest thing to do is just politely smile and change the topic, and that's totally okay as well. Another thing that was very present in the conversation at my Thanksgiving meal was dieting, and I don't know if anyone out there had a similar experience, but I was at a family member's house and they had some friends over, and this one woman who doesn't know me and has no idea what I do for work and just happened to choose me to start telling me all about her latest diet and how she's not eating any of the food at Thanksgiving except for the salad. And it just sounded really awful and miserable, and I felt really sad for her. I felt slightly better when I saw her standing in the kitchen eating all of the foods that she said she wasn't going to eat, which is very natural. And of course what happens with diets, right, is that we say we're not going to have all of those things, but how can we really expect ourselves to be so deprived during Thanksgiving? It's always going to come that you're standing in the kitchen with that bowl of sweet potatoes or candied yams or whatever it is, and then the guilt and shame set in as well. So Again, it can be so difficult to find out, to really figure out for yourself where that line is and what we want, how we want to draw those boundaries. But one way that I think is really useful to draw the boundaries is to think ahead of time of what you might want to say if someone comments on how much you're eating or what you're eating or what diets they're doing. I think that we can come up with little one-liners almost to try to either bring the conversation to a halt or just let them know that you're doing something different. For example, we might say something like, oh, thank you. Actually, what this woman was telling me about her diet, I just said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that you feel that way, that you have to eat that way. That sounds really difficult. I've chosen a life not without dieting. And the conversation didn't go much further than that, but we can certainly let other people know what we're doing. We can say that, I appreciate your comments on my plate, but this is what I'm hungry for. Or we really don't even need to explain ourselves. We can also say something as simple as, thank you, but I'd prefer not to talk about what I'm eating, or are there so many more interesting things that we can talk about other than my food and my body. So I think that trying to redirect the conversation in certain ways, sometimes it can be as simple as just changing the topic or not saying anything, but certainly giving the message that we're not going to engage. We're not going to engage in these habits, in these old patterns. Something else that I hear a lot of as people are going back home, and this is I hear especially with people who actually like go home for the holidays and to their parents' house or to the family that they grew up with, and when there's a lot of dieting entrenched in the family, oftentimes it's really kind of throws everyone off balance when someone comes back and they're actually not on a diet. And oftentimes, people say, well, my mom is asking me what kinds of foods she should buy for me in the house because I'm always doing something. Last year I was doing no carbs. The year before I was doing high protein. The year before I was doing low fat, whatever it is, like this family had kind of stabilized. The mother's way of taking care of the child in some ways was to prepare the house with all of these diet foods. And now that the child wasn't dieting anymore, she was really thrown off. So, we can also, see that sometimes people's pushing into our boundaries is well-intentioned. It's not always done from a mean or harmful place, but that doesn't mean that we have to engage with it either. So, we can always say something like, I really appreciate your offer to help, but I'm able to choose my own foods now. Or, I'm doing, you could share what you're doing if you feel comfortable. I'm doing mindful eating and I don't need any special foods. I'll just eat whatever's served for the family. But the point that I'm trying to drive home though is communicating in some way that we're not going to engage in this conversation. We are not going to alter our behavior. We are not going to we're not going to participate in these kinds of destructive patterns that we have perhaps in the past around, someone telling us what not to eat or what we should eat, and we feel like we have to oblige by that. The other thing that happens is sometimes people will push food on us on the holidays, and this could be another really hard situation to manage, especially if it's somebody who's cooked the food and prepared the food, and they're saying, come on, try this pie that I made, or try this whatever, and you really don't want it, not because you're dieting, of course, but just because like you're full and you don't want it. So, figuring out ways to push back a little bit, just to say, thank you, but I don't want any right now. It's really hard, I find, that when we're not dieting, for other people to understand that it's not that, when we say that we don't want something, it's actually because we really don't want it. It's not because we're trying to, because we really do want it, but we're not allowing ourselves to have it or restricting or anything like that. So I think when we can try to say, oh, that looks delicious, I'm going to try some tomorrow, or maybe even pack me up a piece to go home. But I am so full right now, I really don't want any. I think whatever we do to set boundaries, it's really about holding firm and thinking about what is the best way to take care of you, whether it is engaging in a whole dialogue or just saying, thanks, but no thanks. I also think we have to remember that we can always take a break. Holidays tend to pull for a lot of really stressful situations with family or with friends, a lot of parties, a lot of events. Things can feel really stressful. And I think we have to remember that we can always say no. We can say, no, we don't want to attend that event, whether it is your office holiday party or Christmas Eve with your family. There's nothing written in stone that says that we have to show up around the holidays. If the best way of taking care of yourself is saying that you're not feeling well and you're not going to be able to make it this Christmas, or that you're not going to be able to make it for the Hanukkah party, or whatever it is, I think we have to really prioritize and value that that's our way of taking care of ourselves. And that's totally okay. That's totally fine. And I think that, even if we do go to these events, we can also remember we can always leave early. We can always take a walk. We can always go to the bathroom for a few minutes. We can, duck out and do a little brief meditation. There's so many options that we can do to try to just recenter and balance and take care of ourselves. And that's a point that I want to drive home today, is that setting boundaries and figuring out how to deal with intrusive family members or friends who may comment about your eating or your body is really about finding the best way to take care of yourself. It's remembering that this is a problem with them. This often represents much more about their own issues with food and their body than anything having to do with your own body. And it also, does not mean that there's anything wrong with your body. So trying to hold on to that stance of self-compassion, to set firm boundaries about what you will and will not engage in. Just because someone asks you a question, you don't have to answer it. We can come prepared with some one-liners to try to shut down conversations, and just saying things, as simply as, thank you, but I don't want to talk about my eating. I don't want to talk about my body. There's so many more things that are interesting that we can talk about today. How's your new job? Or how's, the family doing? Or whatever, we can easily change the conversation. And just really trying to stay in tune with how we can nourish and really take care of ourselves. So if you have any tips for how to handle food policing and body shaming when it comes to the holidays, I would love to hear them, and please share them here. If you have any one-liners, if you have like a favorite one-liner of how to shut down those kinds of really awkward conversations about food and body, please share them. I think it would be really helpful for our community to know. And then you can come into the Hanukkah parties next week, the holiday parties coming up, and even Christmas and New Year's, prepared with a whole bunch of easy go-to lines to help shut down the intrusive family members and friends who may try to invade our boundaries, and how to hold those boundaries strong in the sake of taking care of ourselves, I think is really what this is all about. So we're just about out of time for today. If you're interested in learning more about mindful eating and mindfulness meditation, please check out my free 30-day program, the Anti-Diet Plan. It's available on my website, drconison.com. You can also sign up. There's a link on my website that will take you to the page to sign up for the wait list for my new 6-week program. We are just kind of midway through the first session of this. I think that people have been getting a lot out of it. I've been getting some really great feedback about the program, and the next one is going to be launching in January to help fight what is usually the yearly New Year's resolutions hubbub and all of the really destructive marketing messages that we get about New Year, New You, and how to change your body and change your life, and all of that BS that we really don't need to adhere to. And my program is really designed to be an alternative to all of that, to say, screw that. We don't need to change anything other than the way that we're thinking about ourselves and food and our body, and accept ourselves as we are right now, and learn how to develop a more joyful, peaceful, and pleasurable relationship with food and our body. And I hope that my program will help you do that. The next session is going to be starting in January, and you can sign up to be notified on the wait list. You'll be one of the first people to know when the course opens, and you'll also receive a nice little discount as my way of saying thank you for your loyalty. So I hope that everyone will take me up on that offer, and I'll see you next week. Take care.